Frank, I know there's no real shock and awe for coaches. There's more of that for fans watching incredible things. But was there any just, I can't believe we're witnessing this from A-Shane at the pure standpoint of the 12.1 per carry average, which just is outlandish?
Yeah, I think it's a good start to his rookie season, and ultimately, when you're having that level of success, doing your job, the challenge is to work to maintain that standard that you've started off doing. So, which he does. He's you know an awesome guy. Really works at it, diligent in this whole process. So it's been a great start to his rookie season.
What is, and you've watched him now for the past couple of days. Does he look like the same guy with the same burst, same speed, same change of direction, acceleration, blah blah blah?
Yeah, I mean, Sunday always has a different variable of the adrenaline that goes. But yeah, I mean, so far a lot of the guys that are coming back, it's been good to have them on the field working again.
Frank, I've been talking to some of your offensive players about the unscouted looks that you guys see because of Tyreek and your overall speed. Does that work to your advantage because the defense is not familiar with that style, or to your disadvantage because you have not seen that style of defense?
I think it poses a conversation, but at the same time, as we have to talk about what they're doing, if it's going to force us out of, what our intent was and what we're trying to do. But ultimately, it's a good challenge for us to really work through our process, working our rules, and if we trust our rules to our concepts, we should be all right. If conversely, if they're doing something they haven't done before, right, they're having to have the same issues of what are we doing presented. So I think there's, both sides of the coin to all that. But ultimately, that was the best part about here in camp with Vic and the multiplicity of what they do. It forced us to really have some of that communication early on.
Yeah, and I've heard that Tyreek and Tua do a really good job on the sideline of checking with each other and making adjustments. Is that your understanding? Is that what you see?
Yeah, I think overall the offense does a good job together communicating what they're seeing, how they're trying to really get on the same page, connected, because that's the challenge of the season. It's each week every defense is going to pose a different test, or they're going to either show what we've kind of seen before, or they could give us something that we haven't seen before. So I think ultimately our communication together is the most important thing we need to be on.
Frank, I was curious of your kind of thought process when you're drawing up plays. And I thought about, like, when Mike first got here, the core of what he wanted to do was kind of like force defenses to cover all blades, like every blade of grass. So with you, do you think of like personnel first, formations, maybe blocking schemes? Like, what goes through your mind when you put together a play?
Each week it kind of goes. It's along those lines. I mean, each week it's kind of you assess your opponent, yourselves where you're at. Your anticipated guys are going to be available for the game. What's the defense trying to do? Right? How can we, use our matchup guys to attack the defense? For the width of it and the length of the field. So I think that each week the checklist is, as we're talking about, we're trying to hit, maybe one works in front of the other's there, but ultimately it's kind of the same stuff we've been talking about as far as how a lot of times if you don't expand the field, it allows them to compress, and the ability to not compress to compress us allows us to create space in the defense, and I think ultimately that's what offense is trying to do and attack the space.
We're also thinking about how, like, football is cyclical, and obviously there's roots from Kyle Shanahan and Gary Kubiak and whatnot. What is like the oldest play? Not exactly what the play is, but like what is like the oldest play in the playbook? Does it span the 80s, the 70s? Like,
oh man, I mean, there's certain elements that go all the way back to the West Coast of Bill Walsh. So I mean, just as far as the original quick game, when they were in Cincinnati and they were struggling running the football. So how do you create a quick passing game to supplement run yardage? So that's where a lot of those components, those concepts started. So, I'd say for my 5 years in New Orleans, Sean, same thing with West Coast origins. When I worked in Chicago, we were more of a blend with Peyton's system. When we got with Foxy, Jon Gruden obviously was a West Coast guy, and then Joe Lombardi, we ran the Saints offense. So majority of my career has been spent in some forms of it. It's kind of like not everyone's aligned, but it's like Thanksgiving dinner where all the cousins get together, and you're kind of like, when I got with Gruden, it kind of connected a couple things to New Orleans, and you're going like, oh, this, oh, got it, all right. So because John kept a lot of it. I mean, when he left Holmgren, he kept his version intact, so it was the closest back to Green Bay. Or when Sean worked with Gruden, and then he went from there to New York, so there was, and then Dallas, there's some variants. So it's like, oh yeah, well it's like you start off and you get this one, you're like, got it, and you go to the next one, you're like, oh, and then Gruden would do a great job explaining the origins to stuff all the way back to San Francisco with Walsh. So it was like football heaven. Like I'd sit there like, so that's why we do that. And then now here, there's just that background. It was really helpful because there's so much the core of what we do. It all really originates back to the origins of Bill Walsh.
I love that conversation. It's great. I do want to get into specifics of Liam Eichenberg. You guys have locked in with him at center now, kind of out of necessity. He might be back there at guard. What's that transition been like for him? And overall, what's his season been like in terms of what he's had to encounter?
Well, I think it goes back to just the off season when we started that process, creating the versatility for the linemen. Multiple guys playing guard, multiple guys playing center, center tackle, or excuse me, guard tackle. The course of the season, there are many unknowns to it as far as how is it going to play out. So us having the versatility to move guys in multiple spots has been very helpful. So with what he's been able to do for that, a first time playing center, and then you got to go on the road and do it twice, and handle all the communication and all that. I mean, it's for